This is the exact formula that SamDoesArts uses in every single face painting. Take it from a blank canvas to a literal masterpiece. I'll be taking you through each step in excruciating detail, going through sketching, colours, rendering, and much more. I'm going to be applying this formula to see if it really works, and if I can paint like him despite being an amateur artist myself.
First things first, we're going to start off with a sketch.
So here's how to sketch faces like SamDoesArts. Start with a circle or an oval for side profiles. Now sketch around the outside for the jaw. His jaw shape will vary based on the character, so just be mindful of that. You want a larger, sharper jaw for most male characters and a rounder, softer one for the females. And while you're doing this, try to be really clear on the character you want and visualise them on the pages you draw. Now he usually adds the hair from here, in which he does very simply with just a few strokes, keeping in mind the shape language that he wants. But shape language is something that we'll look at in detail a little bit later. He then adds the eyes. They're usually slightly lower down than you'd expect, so his characters look a bit younger. But he uses the guideline of putting them halfway from the top of the circle to the bottom of the chin, and leaving one eye's distance in between the eyes. Now to go really in detail with drawing eyes like him, he starts out with a straight line across the face, getting the perspective he wants to use as a base to constantly make sure both eyes are aligned through the process. He draws the top eyelid first and makes absolutely sure that the perspective is right and how he's wrapping it around the face. Standard shape, he's just drawing it how it should be simplified to a few lines, with this bit dipping in for the front view, peaks of a profile view, and a mix for anything in between. This arc shape for the 3/4 view is good to remember, as well as most other angles are just variations on that. Remember that eye and face is 3D, draw it that way. After the top eyelid, the most important part is out of the way, so you have the proportions in place. Now he has the eye itself, pretty self-explanatory. Make the centre just under halfway down from the eyelid, so it's the right size, and place it on the eyeball, imagining it was there. Now we add some eyelashes. Now you add the lower lid, which is just a simple line where he puts the other side of the skin visible again, sometimes with a few eyelashes. Now, even SamDoesArts makes mistakes and can get things wrong first try, so like him, you still probably want to flip the canvas and use Liquify to make sure the proportions and spacing is right. You can use this simple eye 3D model to better understand the planes, or look at what I've said from different angles to use for practice or reference. If you can memorise this, things will get so much easier and you'll be able to draw any perspective from imagination, so you can get it after you watch the rest of this video. Okay, now for the nose. Again, he's just using basic guidelines and then can vary it slightly based on the specific character he's drawing. Halfway through the nose is 3/4 down from the hairline down to the chin. I should probably note that he does generally skew his proportions, have a larger distance for the middle third with smaller spaces for the upper and lower thirds. This really makes the characters look in that SamDoesArts style. He starts out by going through that guideline and creates this really iconic triangle shape with the underneath of the nose wherever he can. He then adds the nostrils in that shape. The outer width of the nose should be aligned to the inner corners of the eyelids. And how tall the triangle goes really just depends on the perspective. If you're further below the nose and the face is looking higher up, the underside of the nose will be more visible. There may also be a nose 3D model at the end of this video. His noses are pretty simple because he completely removes the nose ridge for his style. So you can stop here or add a little indication of it, having some volume around the side with another triangle. So it's easy for the front view, but I didn't talk about the side view. At a certain point of how far to the side the face is, he does add the nose ridge, and very clearly. He gets this really clear slope shape combined with a hard turn, and the triangle is only visible on one side. Just remember how the nose comes out in relation to this smooth curve from the head, and then it's going in really far before. Then the mouth. Halfway from the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin, you put a simple line. The width goes just slightly before the middle of the top eyelid. It has this shape. Make these bits a bit thicker, this bit really thin or not there at all. That's it. You can add a little cut for the top lip or a small indication of the bottom lip, but nothing else for the mouth. Only if it's open, then he just draws the outline of it in a few simple strokes. So it's the same thing in the eyelid in terms of the arc and what that does to it in different perspectives. And it's missing something. Yeah, you can also do eyebrows immediately after doing the eyes. It's just this simple square shape, pretty easy. If you can see their ears, and once again he doesn't do too much, just this shape and these lines like everyone else. Top of the ear goes to below the brow, bottom of it slightly above or in line with the bottom of the nose. I kind of skipped over the hair before because I want to take a quick look at Sam's shape language. He uses very simple, large shapes for the hair, normally inspired by the feel of the piece. He's really good at creating patterns like this and repeating it throughout the piece to create a feel. Just know that for the hair you should use a few big simple shapes and don't feel like you need to close each one off. You can leave parts open and empty spaces as this is just the sketch. It's what he does and generally makes things look a lot nicer. Colour. This is the good part. Everyone knows Sam for his beautiful colouring, rendered faces, and amazing lighting scenarios. So how does he do it? He starts with some base colours directly under his sketch. The skin colour is usually around here. He puts in some basic colouring on the eyes, mouth and nose. For the eyes it's just adding an off-white for the eyeball, an eye colour, pupil colour, shading for the eyeball, and iris. Doing some light on the iris, remembering that it's a bowl shape and a sharp highlight to really make it pop. For the the nose, he chooses a colour that's slightly more red, slightly darker, and a lot more saturated. With some variation in opacity, he brushes it onto the nose and cheeks overall for some blush. He puts the most on the nose and sometimes can make it really visible so that it creates a subtle triangle shape here, before it softens out to the rest of the cheeks. Then from this orangey red colour, he goes even more saturated and slightly darker to use the colour for the triangle shape on the underside of the nose. In this triangle shape, he puts an even darker colour to use as the nostrils. Finally, you can use another dark colour to add some shadows where the base of the triangle connects with the rest of the and around the nostrils. For the mouth, you can just colour pick or use the same colour that you used for the base of the underside of the nose. Just make it slightly more red and use an airbrush to softly put in the base for the lips. Put it in there at first and refine it using your guidelines, and remembering that most of the volume should be around the centre with the bottom lip bigger than the top. With a hard brush again, he then adds a really dark colour and slightly more saturated in between the two lips, getting the bird shape from before. Then gradually brings it back up to the top lip colour, creating a shadow by doing so. After doing this, it needs to be decided whether it's a diffuse light, hard light, or something in the middle. Basically, the lighting setup needs to be decided. The direction of the light source, its colour, and how strong it will be. Start shading the drawing into 2 tones. But you have some sample skin hex values, shadow values, and hex values for everything that you can get later to make sure you choose the right colours. Pretty much you just want to go slightly more saturated, a decent bit darker, and a little bit away from the light source with its hue for the shadow. He also uses multiply sometimes, in which case he just chooses a colour that's a bit darker and lets the multiply blend mode use the rest. I'm not going to use any blend modes for now though. So after you've got your shadow colour, you need to actually shade it. Think about exactly where the light will be hitting and put the shadows on everything else. Think about where the form is turning away from the light and where there will be cast shadows from things blocking the light. You can use the Asaro head to help with the form shadows. After you've done this, the next step is blending. Anything that's a shadow from form, where it's gradually turning away from the light, you can blend. The softer it turns away, the more you blend it. Whereas anything that's a cast shadow from a solid object blocking the light, you can just leave as is. We're now going to add the light. Sam loves to use golden hour, beautiful light sources, so that's what we'll do for now. To choose the colour, Sam brings the hue towards the direction of the light, so in this case more yellow than the skin, slightly lighter and less saturated. Now for quick pieces he makes in his videos, it's normal for him not to add much or any light at all, but for the full pieces on his Instagram he definitely does. So we've got the light colour, now we just have to apply it to the face. Wherever it's the most exposed to the light, in the areas that are already light, you add light. Simple. Vary the opacity and blend it a bit so it fits in, but then just repeat a couple more times with lighter and lighter colours, doing the same thing to the colour each time. When you get to the lightest lights, it's important to place them in the areas of the face that are most reflective. So the inside corner of the eyes, the tip of the nose, this area of the cheek, these areas of the lip, and the top eyelids catch some. Of course, you probably shouldn't make all of these areas super light in every piece, but it is good to know, because in pretty much every painting that has highlights in them, some of these areas are going to get hit. So for the shadows, you do the same thing as before, going darker, slightly more saturated, and slightly away from the light colour. You put the darkest colour in the areas of ambient occlusion, where you think no light can get to, then create a transition to that colour within the shadows. Add some soft bounce light in the shadows based on the environment, and generally you want to use a soft brush for it, but it really depends. Sam does this super well, but still subtly, and it makes all his pieces have so much depth then. Lastly, the touch-ups. This gives them that SamDoesArts flair. He of course uses tons of saturated orange and red to polish up his paintings. With a soft brush he'll apply it to the transition in between the light and shadow, the top of the ears, and if they're being hit by the light, and sometimes make the shadow red or orangey as well in the exposed areas. If the light's not so strong, the same principles apply, but just make the shadow and light less harsh, so don't go as far down or up when choosing the colours. You'll probably be blending most of it. This orange transition won't be there, so make sure the bounce light is correct and works well. Links to all the assets and stuff in the description. So yeah, that's it. That's how you paint faces like SamDoesArts.